Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
After the meeting ended, Aurora and Lux retired to the young ladies' temporary room in Barbados Academy. Of course, Aiko went with them because she had a lot of stories to tell to her papa. Lux attentively listened to all of them, and he couldn't help but smile due to how animated Aiko looked when she started telling him about how she fought against the Abyssal Lords and how she protected the Ford Federation from their attacks. She even shared with him the story of how the king of the island nation of Torstein begged for her help in repelling the Abyssal army that had reached their borders. "Pa, you're amazing, Aiko. Pa, good girl. You did well." The baby slime giggled after receiving her papa's praise. She truly missed Lux, and she didn't want to part with him for the time being. As long as nothing drastic happened in the territories under her control, Aiko planned to stay with Lux until she was satisfied. Of course, Lux was more than happy to spend some time with the baby slime, who was acting like a spoiled child who wanted his attention. Even Aurora found this side of Aiko very cute, and she simply listened at the side as the father and daughter pair chatted happily. "Pa." Aiko looked at her papa with a sad expression on her face. Lux sighed and lightly patted her head. "I know, Aiko. Don't worry. I'll find a way to make your mama recover her memories." Aiko nodded before closing her eyes to enjoy her papa's petting. Meanwhile, inside Iris' bedroom, that half-elf, why does he look familiar and unfamiliar at the same time? Iris said, even Aiko seems to know him. She even calls him Pa. "I know, right?" Kai replied as she placed her hand over her chest. "When I saw him, I felt my heart skip a beat. I don't know what happened to me. I am pretty certain that he didn't use a charm spell on me. I have immunity to those kinds of spells." Kai had reverted to her human form since she and Iris were alone inside her room. Both girls were feeling confused about why they were reacting like this to a stranger whom they had met for the first time today. "Did you feel anything when he was together with Aurora?" Iris inquired, especially when she kissed him earlier. "I was in my boar form earlier, so I didn't think much about it," Kai replied. "But thinking about it now, I feel envious for some reason." "For me, I felt jealousy," Iris admitted. "I can't explain why, but it just felt that Aurora had something that I didn't. It's making me feel frustrated." Iris was very popular among the young men of the Six Kingdoms, so she had seen many handsome young men try to approach her and ask for her hand in marriage. Nearly all of them had told her that it was a shame that she still didn't have any partner despite being so beautiful, which never failed to make Iris roll her eyes. Of course, she knew she was beautiful, but she also knew that more than anything, they were just approaching her to form a closer connection with her father, who was a saint. Also, Alexander made it clear that Iris was already betrothed to someone and that he wasn't going to entertain any suitors for his daughter. Iris was surprised when he declared his stance because she didn't know that she was already betrothed to someone. However, she didn't say anything about her father's words, thinking that this was merely his way of protecting her and preventing anyone from successfully asking for her hand in marriage. "Iris, there's something that I want to tell you," Kai said with a solemn expression on her face. "Grandpa approached me earlier and asked me if I liked Lux. He said that all I need to do is nod my head, and he would ensure that he would become my lover, like Aurora." What? Iris looked at Kai in disbelief. Grandpa Maximilian said what? "He told me that all I needed to do was nod my head, and Lux would become my fiancé." Kai repeated what she said earlier. "I was also surprised to think that my grandpa, who is overprotective of me and my sister, Rose, would say such a thing." Then, did you agree to become his fiancé?" Iris asked. Her heart was beating wildly inside her chest, making her feel very anxious. She couldn't understand why she was reacting like this whenever a topic involved the half-elf, whom she had just met. However, the more she thought about him, the more painful it felt seeing him with Aurora, especially with Aiko in the mix, making them look like a family. "I told him that I need some time to think about it," Kai answered. I just met him. Everything feels rushed, and yet, why do I feel that being with him is just right? I don't understand why I am feeling this way, but these are my honest feelings. How about you, Iris?" Did your father mention anything similar to mine? Sir Alexander did? Iris reluctantly nodded her head. This happened after Lux, Aiko, and Aurora left her residence together. Maximilian called for Kai, while Alexander talked to Iris in private. Just like the patriarch of the Rowan tribe, Alexander brought up the half-elf in their conversation. He asked Iris if she was willing to become Lux's fiancée, which surprised her. Don't you feel like my father and your grandpa seem to know Lux? Iris asked. The way they look at him is different from how they look at the people who have tried to ask for my hand in marriage. Now that you mention it, my grandpa doesn't look at him with hostility. Kai frowned. Maybe he can tell that Lux is a good person? Well, since Aiko is close to him, that means that he isn't a bad person, Iris nodded. Also, I am honestly surprised that she kept on calling him Pa. If other young men were to try to hold her like that, she would not hesitate to throw blast bombs at them. Kai giggled because she had personally witnessed such scenes in the past. Many young men wanted to get close to Iris, and some of them thought that if they managed to become good friends with the baby slime, whom she treated as her daughter, they would only be a step away from making Iris fall for them. But the only thing they got from this attempt was a blast bomb in the face, making them flee for their lives. Iris, why don't we both agree to become his fiancée? Kai asked. That way, the two of us can always be together. What do you think? Iris thought for a while after hearing Kai's proposal. Although she didn't want to admit it, she felt a very strong connection to the half-elf. It was as if he was the last piece of the puzzle that would complete her, making her understand what it was like to truly fall in love with someone, which she had never felt in the past. So, what do you think, Lux? Alexander asked. I'm fine with this arrangement, Lux replied. After all, both of them were already my fiancés to begin with. Maximilian chuckled after hearing the young man's reply. The patriarch of the Rowan tribe had already recognized Lux as Kai's fiancée, so there was no way that he would allow his granddaughter to marry someone else. Although Iris and Kai had forgotten about Lux, their guardians didn't, and both men were simply returning things to how they were in the past. Of course, although Lux agreed, Iris and Kai still had the final say. He just hoped that the two would agree to this arrangement, allowing him to do a few experiments that might trigger their memories to return to them. What are your plans, Lux? Alexander asked. Care to share them? Lux nodded. First and foremost, I would like to conduct a few experiments to see whether I can make Iris and Kai remember me. Also, I'm sure that both of you also tried your best to make them remember. If possible, please share what methods you used and what was their reaction to each of them. Okay, Alexander replied. I'll tell you what I have discovered. The headmaster of Barbados Academy told Lux that whenever he tried to force Iris to remember him, the young lady would suffer from a headache. Afterward, she would lose consciousness. Every time she woke up after the attempt, she wouldn't remember what Alexander had done to make her remember. In the end, he gave up because he didn't want to see Iris suffer. Maximilian's explanation was the same as Alexander's. Kai would suffer from a terrible headache and fall unconscious whenever she was close to remembering something about him. It was as if some sort of trigger would force the two ladies to lose consciousness whenever they tried to recall anything about the half-elf. Hearing their replies, Lux could only sigh helplessly because he had already expected as much. He didn't know whether the experiments he would conduct would trigger the same reaction in the two ladies, but he still believed that he should at least give it a try. Aiko was happily perched on top of her papa's head like old times, which made her feel at ease. Although she liked the feeling of liberation and freedom, after not seeing Lux for a year, she planned to stay with him for some time. Since the Ford Federation was currently peaceful, she had all the time in the world to stay with her papa, whom she missed very much. After his short meeting with Alexander and Maximilian, Lux decided to look for Aurora. With her powers, she was able to connect to Iris and Kai's emotions, giving her an idea of what they were thinking and feeling. As he walked through the hallways, he found Vera standing on a balcony, overlooking Regulus City. Sensing his presence, the old lady smiled and beckoned Lux to come close to her. The half-elf obeyed, prompting Aiko to happily jump towards Vera while shouting, Manhwa. The silver-haired beauty smiled and caught the giggling baby slime with both hands before giving her a kiss on the cheek. It seems that Eiko really likes you, Lux, Vera said with a smile. I've never seen her act this way aside from when she is with Iris. So, tell me, child, have you met Eiko somewhere? Yes, Lux replied. I've known her since she was a baby. Well, she is still a baby, but I've known her ever since the moment she hatched from her egg. Oh. Vera looked at the half-elf with an appraising gaze, as if checking to see if he was lying to her or not. It was very hard to lie to a saint, so it was very easy for Vera to tell that Lux wasn't lying, which made her frown. You said you knew her right after she hatched from her egg? Vera inquired. Yes, Lux replied. In fact, Eiko was hatched from the egg that I found in Elysium. Thinking that this was a good opportunity, Lux decided to give it a shot. Since Vera could tell if he was lying or not, this was a good chance to see if he could make her remember anything. As long as he was speaking the truth, she would be more inclined to believe him. Eiko was born from the egg that you found in Elysium? Vera asked in confusion. That can't be. Iris was the one that hatched her egg. Indeed. Lux nodded. Iris was the one who hatched her egg, but I am the one who brought Eiko's egg to her. Vera pinched the bridge of her nose as she tried to recall how Iris had gotten hold of Eiko's egg. The only thing she could remember was that Eiko was hatched in Barbados Academy and that Iris was the one who had taken care of her ever since. Grandma, how about you ask me a different question? Lux proposed. For example, you can ask me where I grew up and who raised me. Vera smiled before shaking her head. Child, everyone has their secrets, and I am not one to pry into the privacy of others. Lux sighed internally because his plan to make Vera ask about his childhood didn't work, but he decided to try his luck one more time. Since Vera didn't ask him, he decided to just take the initiative to tell her about his life story. Grandma, do you know? When I was still a baby, you and Sophie saved me from being eaten by the giant crocodiles of Huntine River, Lux said softly, but clearly. If not for you, I would have become their snack. After that, you brought me to Wildguard Stronghold to raise as your own grandchild. Vera frowned because she was starting to feel a headache as she listened to Lux's story. His words contained no lies, and yet, she was 100% confident that none of the things he mentioned actually happened. You're a very good liar. Liar, child, Vera said as she rubbed her temple due to the pain she was feeling in her head. You can even lie to a saint. This is a very impressive skill. Lux endured the disappointment that was welling up inside his chest as he gazed at his grandma, who was looking at him with caution. Grandma, do you really think I am lying? Lux asked. Yes, Vera replied. You are a very good liar. Even I cannot detect any falsehood from your words. Not many people can hoodwink a saint, you know? This is an achievement that you can be proud of. But I advise you to not make a habit of lying to me often. I know that my son, Alexander, plans to make you my granddaughter's fiancé. Originally, I didn't oppose his decision, but now, I am starting to reconsider whether he made the right judgment in choosing you as Iris' future partner. So why don't we do it like this, Lux? I will pretend that none of this happened, and you will stop telling lies. How about it? We can still be good in-laws if you do this. Lux didn't answer right away. He knew that if he tried to push his luck, Vera would start to become wary of him and might even force Alexander to rethink his proposal of making the half-elf her granddaughter's fiancé. A person who could lie to her with a straight face was a very dangerous individual, and to be honest, she was starting to think of Lux as such. Lux understood this. Since Vera was starting to doubt him, this doubt would only grow with time, and there was nothing he could do about it. Should I take a step back here and play it safe, or should I take another gamble? Lux thought. After careful consideration, he chose to take a gamble. Grandma, what do I need to do for you to believe my words? Lux asked. You can make me do anything, even make me do something impossible. But once I do it, promise me that you will believe my words no matter how impossible it seems. Do we have a deal? Vera looked at the half-elf with a calm expression on her face. Truth be told, she found it hard to be angry at Lux. The mere thought of seeing him with a pained expression made her feel anxious. She called out to him because she wanted to know him better. Something was compelling her to talk to him to better understand what his character was like. But the moment he started talking about the time when he was a baby, fear gripped Vera's heart. There was no doubt that Lux was telling the truth, but no matter how hard she tried to recall what he was talking about, she couldn't recall anything. This was the part that scared her. What if the half-elf was telling the truth, and it was she who had the problem? Because of this, Vera reluctantly nodded her head and told Lux the thing he needed to do that would make her believe him no matter what. Lux sighed for the umpteenth time as he rested his head on Aurora's lap. His talk with his grandma was nerve-wracking, but fortunately, both of them ended up in a compromise. Vera asked him to let her see all of his memories, which he happily agreed to. However, just as she was about to tap into Lux's memories, she was attacked by a head-splitting headache, making her cry out in pain. This pain immediately disappeared the moment she severed her connection from Lux, canceling the mind-reading ceremony before it began in full. Several minutes later, Vera recovered. But she had completely forgotten about the agreement they had with each other. It was as if her memory had been sealed, or forcefully stripped away from her by an invisible law, making her forget the things that she and Lux had talked about. The last thing she remembered was calling out to Lux to talk, but she had no recollection of what happened afterwards. No matter how hard she tried to recall, this was the only thing that was registering inside her head. In the end, the half-elf excused himself and returned to Aurora's room with Eiko, feeling very depressed by his failed attempt to make his grandma remember him. "It's useless to make them remember forcefully," Lux said in a defeated tone. "I have to think of a different way to make them remember." Eiko was currently sleeping peacefully on his chest because she didn't rest for the past few days due to the non-stop battles in her territory. Now that her papa had returned, she felt more relaxed and at ease, so her exhaustion finally caught up to her, making her feel sleepy. Lux didn't want to disturb Eiko, so he allowed her to rest inside his shirt like she used to do when she was young. "Don't worry," Aurora said in an encouraging tone while gently patting his head. "You will find a way, I'm sure of it. Also, even if Iris and Kai don't remember you in the short term, nothing is stopping you from creating new memories with them, right? Also, I'm pretty sure they will agree to become your fiancé." "Are you sure?" Lux asked. "Will they really agree to become my fiancé?" Aurora giggled before lightly pinching Lux's nose. "You're talking as if they weren't already your fiancé back then," Aurora stated. "Things are just returning to how they were in the past. The only difference is that they no longer remember your existence. But I don't see any problem with you creating new memories with them. Who knows? This might also be a good thing for you." "Good thing? How? Aren't you curious? Iris and Kai have forgotten about you, but their hearts and bodies still remember. Look at their reactions when you hold their hand, look into their eyes, and when you do something intimate with them. I believe that they only need a small spark before they melt in your embrace." Lux looked at his lover, who had a mischievous look on her face. "You talk as if you have known them for years," Lux said. "Since when did you know a lot about your sisters?" "Believe me when I say that I know their emotional states more than you do," Aurora replied with confidence. "Do you want to make a bet with me?" "I'm listening," Lux replied. Aurora smiled and told her lover about the details of their bet. Lux found the rules quite amusing, but he still agreed to them in the end. "This feels immoral," Lux pinched the bridge of his nose. "But I am also curious about what will happen afterwards." "Right?" Aurora smirked. "I'm also very curious to know how it will turn out. Where did my innocent Aurora go? It's all your fault that she changed, you know? You took her first time and made her cry and worry for you for an entire year. You should take responsibility and ease her pain." The two stared at each other for half a minute before Lux raised his head to kiss her lips. Since Eiko was with them, the two didn't do anything too sensual, but that was enough, at least for now. Somewhere in the western part of Elysium, Nyarlathotep sat on the throne of a destroyed throne room, allowing him to see the black smoke that was rising over the city that he had just conquered. The shouts of despair, pain, and suffering reverberated in the surroundings, and he was enjoying every second of it. A moment later, a winged demon landed in front of him and knelt to pay his respects. "Lord Nyarlathotep, I bring news from Lord Elijah," the demon said. Do I have permission to state his message? Why not? Nyarlathotep replied in a carefree manner. What does that fallen angel want this time? Does he want my help to attack the dragons? Or perhaps he wanted my assistance to raid the world tree? Neither, my lord. The demon shook his head. He just asked me to pass a message that he would soon start his invasion of Agartha, the kingdom that is located near the core of Elysium. Oh. Nyarlathotep's interest was mildly piqued by this turn of events. Well, tell him that I wish him good luck. I will head west a little while longer and conquer all the lands in my way. When I start to feel bored, I will return to see their accomplishments. So, make sure to tell them to work hard in order to not disappoint me. As you command, my lord. The demon bowed respectfully before leaving the throne room to deliver the news back to the fallen angel, who had gained control over the leadership of the abyssal lords who had gathered at the center of Elysium. Nyarlathotep watched as the demon disappeared from his view before leaning on his throne. It seems that the fallen angel wanted to unite all the abyssal lords under his banner, Nyarlathotep muttered. Well, as long as he proves himself useful, then he can do whatever he wants to do. Nyarlathotep looked up at the sky and couldn't help but chuckle. Daniel, oh Daniel, I'm sure that you're feeling very frustrated right now, Nyarlathotep said in a teasing tone. The gods managed to thwart your plans halfway. So, what will you do now? Shut up, Nyarlathotep. Just do as planned, Daniel's voice that was filled with annoyance replied. The abyss and its connection between Solais and Elysium was not severed completely. However, it is currently impossible for any abyssal creature to pass through to the two worlds. The only thing I can do right now is contact you through the connection we share. How is the invasion? My conquest of the West is proceeding as planned, Nyarlathotep answered. The battle at the center of Elysium has reached a stalemate. Elijah has rallied the other abyssal lords and is planning to target Agartha. I don't know if they will succeed, but the chances are very high. Daniel snorted. Agartha. That kingdom may be ancient, and they did have the power to resist the abyssal lords to a certain extent, but they will still fall in the end. I cannot maintain this connection for long, so make sure to report to me if there are any significant changes in the status quo. For the time being, I will think of ways to re-establish the connection between the worlds. Very well, Nyarlathotep replied. Don't keep me waiting for too long. If you do, I will destroy this world without you. I'd like to see you try, Daniel said in a mocking tone. You might be strong, but you're not the strongest. I look forward to hearing the good news about Agartha's invasion in a few weeks. Nyarlathotep felt that his connection with Daniel had finally been cut off. The outer god once again chuckled because even though his collaborator had tried hard to hide it, he was still able to sense the desperation in his voice. This is why I can't get enough of this chaotic world, Nyarlathotep stated before standing up from his throne. Now, which kingdom should I destroy next? The outer god disappeared from the throne room. Everyone in the city had already been killed, and the strong ones had been turned into mindless thralls, serving the abyssal army to destroy their fellow men, who would soon suffer the same fate as them. Iris sat beside Lux while looking at the scenery in front of her. Eiko was humming happily on top of her papa's head because she felt very happy today. After Alexander asked her if she was willing to become Lux's fiancée, the young lady thought about it for a day before giving her answer. The headmaster of Barbados Academy didn't want to force his daughter into becoming Lux's fiancée because it might have the opposite effect. After what happened to his grandma Vera, the half-elf also didn't want to choose this kind of approach, so he decided to just leave the decision to Iris and Kai if they were willing to become his lovers. Fortunately, the two ladies agreed. Part of their reason was that whenever they looked at him, they found him very pleasing to their eyes. The two of them had seen many handsome men, but their hearts, minds, and bodies never reacted this strongly to any of them. Originally, they thought that the half-elf was using a charm spell on them, but after careful consideration, they deemed this to be impossible. Both of them were nearly immune to this kind of thing, especially since they were members of Heaven's Gate. Their guild buffs raised all of their resistances, shielding their minds from such attacks. The other thing that convinced Iris to accept his father's proposal was Eiko. The baby slime was very happy being with Lux, and she also called him Pa. making Iris feel as if the baby slime had truly acknowledged the half-elf as her papa. Since that was the case, she felt as if this was meant to be, so she threw caution to the wind and agreed to become his fiancé. Kai, on the other hand, had a more simple reason for accepting Lux as her lover. Lux was her type, and for some reason, her body would heat up whenever she was near him. This was a very primal feeling that was born from instinct. Kai instinctively knew that Lux would be able to give her strong children, which was a very important factor when it came to finding her partner in life. Also, when she was in her boar form, she couldn't help but feel the strong desire to pin Lux down and have her way with him. Kai was very ashamed of this discovery because she didn't expect that her boar form would act aggressively like this. Even though she could transform into her Thurian form, that didn't mean that she was up for bestiality. In order to calm herself down, she decided to reject Lux's invitation to go on a picnic while she stabilized her body and heart. Because of this, it was only Lux, Iris, and Eiko who went on the picnic and were currently enjoying the view of the city from on top of a hill. This was the same hill where Alexander appeared to comfort Lux after he first met with Iris and Vera in the city of Regulus. Aurora might not be with them, but she was nearby. Her senses were connected to Iris, and she was paying close attention to the blue-haired beauty's emotions, which she would report directly to Lux through their guild chat. Eiko, do you want to eat? Lux asked the baby slime who was perched on top of his head. Pa. Okay, come down from my head. I don't want to deal with breadcrumbs later. K. The baby slime obediently crawled down until she arrived on Lux's right knee. There, she remained in place and waited for her papa to feed her. Lux didn't hesitate and fed her a sandwich, making the baby slime to open her mouth wide. Is it good? Do you want more?
Yes.
The half-elf fed Eiko another sandwich, and the latter ate it with a big smile on her face. Iris, who was averting her gaze earlier, looked at the baby slime's happy face before shifting her attention to Lux, who was looking at Eiko with an affectionate look on his face. Eiko seems to like you very much, Iris said as she took the initiative to start a conversation with him. I also like her very much, Lux replied as he glanced at Iris with a smile. You raised her well. Well, she is indeed a handful at times, but she is a very good girl. That she is. The half-elf took another sandwich from the basket and continued to feed the baby slime, whose appetite returned after seeing her papa and mama talking again. Lux, can you tell me more about you? Iris asked. I want to know you better. Of course, Lux replied. Lux told her about his adventures in Elysium, making sure not to mention anything about his childhood. He had changed his strategy a bit. Instead of trying to make them recall him, he decided to see if they could retain their memory of him. If they would be able to do that, then he could just create new memories with them, while finding a way to make them remember their past moments with him. This was Aurora's suggestion, and Lux thought that this was also the safest route to take right now. The more Lux talked about himself, the more he realized that he wasn't triggering Iris' headache, which was a good thing. Iris, on the other hand, found Lux's stories quite thrilling. Before she noticed it, her right hand was already resting over his hand, but she didn't make any attempt to move it away. For some reason, touching him like this was making her body tingle all over, in a good way. Lux then held her hand in his own, giving it a gentle squeeze. He then continued to talk about things about himself and the struggles he faced as he journeyed to Elysium. Hours passed as he continued to tell his tale, sharing his lifetime of memories to one of the people who held a special place in her heart. As the sun slowly set in the horizon and the first stars appeared in the sky, Lux's voice slowed down as a hint of sadness permeated his voice. He was telling Iris about his master's death, which was due to his carelessness. Lux had always felt guilty about his master's death, although he knew that GAP would die either way because he had sacrificed everything to get his revenge. Knowing that he died because of him still made him very sad. Iris felt an ache in her heart when she saw Lux feeling sad and defenseless. In that moment, an overwhelming urge to hold him close took control of her body. The young lady then moved to wrap her hands around Lux's head and pulled him close to her chest. She then rubbed his back as the half-elf's body shuddered. Lux was doing his best not to cry because he had already cried so many times since he returned to Solais. It took a lot of effort, but he succeeded. Iris' touch and her supportive words allowed him to overcome the sadness that had almost taken control of his body. "Thank you," Lux said as he reluctantly pulled back to look at the young lady, who was looking back at him with moist eyes. Her face was flushed, and her breathing was a little ragged. It seemed that holding Lux close to her had an effect on her body, making her feel confused. Seeing the lost expression on her face, Lux was no longer able to hold himself back and moved his head closer to him. A few seconds later, he tasted sweetness. A sweetness that made his body shudder. Iris was surprised that Lux kissed her. However, she didn't dislike it. Eiko watched as her papa and mama started to kiss each other passionately. Being the smart baby that she was, Eiko decided to return to Barbados Academy to look for her Manhwa. On top of the hill overlooking Regula City, the faint sound of kisses reverberated in the surroundings, making Aurora, who was watching from afar, smile from ear to ear. Iris laid down on her bed, hugging a pillow. Her face was beet red as she recalled the memory of what happened a few hours ago. "I can't believe it," Iris muttered to herself after remembering that she had also taken the initiative to kiss Lux and even pinned him down on the picnic blanket, kissing him passionately on the lips. "There must be something very wrong with me," Iris thought. "That was my first kiss, yet I gave it to him without any second thoughts. But being kissed by him felt so good." The young lady's face turned a shade redder when she also remembered the thing that happened afterward. While she and Lux were kissing, he moved to switch positions with her. This time, she was the one being pinned down on the blanket, while the young man was above her. His hand then snaked toward her breasts and gently groped them through her clothes. Iris was surprised at first and wanted to pry his hands away, but before she could do that, she felt herself losing strength as if her whole body had turned to jelly. The only thing she could do was hold onto Lux's wrist as he lovingly kneaded her softness with a look of longing on his face. If there was an outsider watching them, they would think that the one forcing Lux to knead her chest was Iris, who had muffled moans escaping her lips. At that point, Iris no longer had any strength to resist any of his advances. She even thought that Lux would take her then and there, and that she would probably not hate him for it. But the half-elf didn't go that far. Perhaps he came back to his senses and apologized to her after seeing her flushed expression. Helping her fix her crumpled clothes, he waited for her to recover a bit of her strength before bringing her back to the academy in a princess carry. Why do I feel relieved and disappointed at the same time when he didn't go further? Iris muttered, burying her head in the pillow due to the embarrassment that she was feeling. I didn't think that I was this loose as a woman. What is happening to me? Why are my heart and body reacting this way toward him? Are we that compatible? Iris' mind was in a mess, unable to think properly about whether she liked Lux or not. While the young lady had locked herself up inside her room, the half-elf headed straight to Aurora's room, where his lover was already waiting for him. "Why didn't you go all the way?" Aurora asked in a curious tone. Iris was ready for it. "She might be, but I was not." Lux sighed before sitting down on top of Aurora's bed. "I was almost unable to hold myself back. If not for the fact that I was afraid that making love with her could trigger her memories to come back, I would have already done it." The half-elf sighed a second time as he looked at his hands. Hands that had held Iris's soft breasts, which he had missed so much. "I see. So you want to take the slow approach?" Aurora nodded in understanding. "This way, even if she recalls her past memories from you, the new memories that you have made with her won't disappear." "Yes," Lux nodded. "This is what I plan to do for now. Slowly but surely create new memories with her so that even if she suffers from a headache, there will be a waypoint in her memories she could return to." Simply put, Lux planned to create anchors that would embed themselves deep inside her subconscious mind, allowing the young lady to retain the new memories that they had created together. "Are you planning to do the same for Kai?" Aurora inquired. "Yes," Lux replied. "Iris has received too much stimulation for the day. She needs some time to rest and reset her emotions. Tell me, did you find anything while you were sharing her senses?" Aurora smiled sweetly before nodding her head. "Yes," Aurora said. At the beginning, she was doing her best to not look at you because it was making her heart flutter. Then, when you kissed her, her emotions burst forth. Her heart and body, which have been deprived of your love, finally lost control. That was why she pinned you down and took the initiative to kiss you of her own accord. Aurora then held Lux's hands and looked at him straight in the eye. I'll just tell you this. I'm pretty sure that Kai will react the same way as Iris, Aurora stated. Don't underestimate skinship. The more you touch them, the more their body will react to you. Even if you only hold their hand, you will make ripples in their subconscious minds, allowing you to plant your seed deeper into their minds, making them unable to forget the current you. Lux nodded. Thank you, Aurora. I'm glad you're here with me. Just as the two were about to kiss each other, they heard a knock on the door, startling the both of them. Lux, are you there? Alicia's voice called out from the other side of the door. The headmaster wants to talk to you. He said it's important. Aurora sighed before giving the half-elf a quick peck on his right cheek before urging him to go and see his father. Lux obeyed and headed straight to the headmaster's office to find out what important things he wanted to discuss with him. The moment he entered the room, he saw 3 people inside. Alexander, Maximilian, and Keen's master all had solemn expressions on their faces. The Abyssal Lords have grouped together and launched an attack, Alexander stated. Where did they attack? Lux asked in a cold tone. Did they attack Karshvar Draconis, the Crystal Palace, or did they target the World Tree of Asporfrieden? They targeted neither of those places, Alexander replied. The Abyssal army had started to move, and from what the scouts of the Grand Alliance had reported, all of them seemed to be headed away from the center of Elysium. Isn't that a good thing? Lux asked. But before Alexander could even answer Lux's question, a familiar voice reached his ears. Master, I just saw a vision. The Abyssal army is going to launch a massive invasion. The Oracle of the Divine Army, Maeve, said in an anxious tone, and their target is going to be the kingdom of Agartha. Lux's expression turned icy the moment he heard the Oracle's vision. He then shared this news with Alexander, Maximilian, and the Void before leaving the headmaster's office to talk to Aurora, whose kingdom was about to be attacked by dozens of Abyssal Lords of the demigod rank. After knowing that her kingdom was about to be attacked by the Abyssal army, Aurora didn't hesitate to ask Lux to help her defend her homeland. Of course, the half-elf didn't reject her request and immediately teleported back with her to the ancient kingdom, which many historians coined as the first kingdom of Elysium. As a supreme, King Septimius, the king of Agartha, remembered Lux and welcomed him with open arms. He had already accepted that this young man was his daughter's chosen one, making Lux his son-in-law. Unfortunately, Aurora's sister, Princess Shayna, had forgotten about him, making her wonder why her sister and her father were treating the half-elf as if he was already part of their family. After the greeting session ended, Lux immediately told the king of Agartha that the Abyssal army was preparing to invade their lands. King Septimius didn't doubt Lux's words for a moment because the half-elf wouldn't possibly lie to him about something like this. Also, even if he doubted his words, he would still create a contingency plan to ensure that the Abyssal Lords would have a hard time reaching his kingdom. Sound the bell of Soteria? King Septimius ordered. Let it be heard all across Agartha. A few minutes later, the loud tolling of the bell resounded in the surroundings. The bell of Soteria had only been rung 3 times since the founding of Agartha. The 3rd time that it was used was during the First Abyssal War, when the surface world descended into complete chaos. During that time, the Agarthians took up arms and helped their fellow Elysians defend their world. Even now, they had already prepared their army to support the Grand Alliance should they choose to execute an all-out attack in an attempt to wipe out the Abyssal army from the face of the world. Unfortunately, the dragons, the High Elves, as well as the other factions of the worlds, were busy doing their best to prevent the Abyssal army from conquering their own domains. As such, the Agarthians hadn't sent any of their armies to the surface, for that would mean that they would be fighting the battle alone. Doing so would only annihilate their army. Even if they were strong, their strength was not at a level where they could face that many Abyssal demigods on their own. Hidden deep within the underground chambers of the castle, the lids of several sarcophagi moved to the side. One by one, Old men and women who had wrinkles all over their faces and bodies rose from their long slumber and sighed. "I guess these old bones will have to fight one last time," an old man cackled. "Ha, what a good day to die. To think that I would see you again after all this time. I wish you had stayed dead," an old lady, whose wrinkles would not lose to the old man, snorted. "Our souls have long departed this world, but our wills were left behind for this very day." "Indeed," another old man commented as he slowly placed his feet on the cold floor. "We are relics of the past, already long forgotten by most of our people. And yet, during its time of need, we all rise from our decrepit coffins to fight one last time." The other men and women, who had risen from their respective coffins, nodded their heads at the same time. Some of them weren't old. In fact, the majority of them looked like middle-aged men and women. But regardless of what they looked like, one thing was certain. All of them were very powerful. The majority of them were saints, but there were also dozens of supremes among their ranks. They were the previous kings and queens of Agartha, who had witnessed the world since the founding of their kingdom. Each king and queen was duty-bound to leave a remnant of their will inside their bodies so that even after their death, they would all rise up to fight one last battle. A battle that would decide whether their ancient kingdom would remain standing or be buried with them in the sands of time. Lux, who was very sensitive to the power of the dead, shuddered before his gaze shifted to the floor under his feet. "Do you feel them, Lux?" King Septimius asked with a knowing smile on his face. "Of course you do. After all, you are the Necromancer of heaven. It is impossible for you to miss them." "Who are they, your majesty?" Lux inquired. "They are Elysium's firstborns," King Septimius replied. "You see, there was a prophecy given to the first king of Elysium that there would come a day when the kingdom of Agartha would face complete annihilation. In order to prevent this from happening, all of the kings and queens who ruled Agartha were duty-bound to bind their will inside their bodies while they were still alive. So, at the moment of their death, their bodies would only enter a half-dead state. Their bodies would then be preserved inside specially made coffins, which were imbued with a special kind of magic. When the kingdom faces a threat that it can't handle on its own, only then will these ancient kings and queens rise from their eternal slumber to fight for our kingdom one last time." Lux nodded in understanding. "Good. The more help we can get, the better. I will also make preparations to defend this kingdom from the Abyssal Lords." The half-elf then shifted his attention to Aurora and gave her a reassuring smile. "Stay with your sister and hide in the underground shelters," Lux said. "I will handle the rest." Aurora nodded. "Stay safe." "I will," Lux replied. A moment later, the half-elf left the throne room. "Master, only I and King Leoric have reached the quota that my brothers and sisters have agreed upon," Asmodeus said as he appeared beside his master, walking by his side. "However, if you truly wish for it, they will return to answer your call." "Thank you, Asmodeus," Lux replied. "For now, you, King Leoric, Avernus, Andrus, Strigoi, and Blackfire will assist me in defending the kingdom of Agartha. I will also ask for Aiko's help. The 5 of us should be enough to handle several demigods." Asmodeus nodded his head in agreement. With the 5 of them, they should be strong enough to handle several demigods at the same time. He and the others weren't there when Lux had fought against Daniel. This was Asmodeus' greatest shame. Because of this, he had assembled a strong undead army that would wreak havoc on his foes. He had prepared a long time for this day, and he would show his master that the 1 year the Lich King had spent traveling all over Elysium wasn't done in vain. Elijah's plan was simple. Attack the entrances that were used by Agarthians in order to enter their underground kingdom. He had already gained information from a king of a kingdom that was affiliated with Agartha. Of course, the king didn't give away this information on his own accord. That would have been impossible. Elijah extracted this information directly from the king's soul, reading all of his memories like reading a book. This was also why he had proposed that all demigods temporarily withdraw their offensive against the dragons and the elves, shifting the focus on Agartha. He believed that it would be easier to capture the ancient kingdom, which only had 3 supremes as its guardians. Aside from King Septimius, There were 2 more Supremes that protected Agartha, keeping it safe from outsiders. Still, the fallen angel wasn't worried. Their side had 50 demigods who would join him in this invasion. The armies under their command numbered in the millions, and with this, he was certain of their victory. But just as he arrived at the location where the entrances of Agartha were located, they couldn't find them. In order to prevent their enemies from easily reaching their kingdom, King Septimius ordered that all the entrances that led to Agartha must be destroyed, sealing them off completely. Knowing that their kingdom's future was at stake, the Agarthians took this order critically and ensured that not a single entrance remained open after they were done. When Elijah and the other demigods realized what King Septimius had done, they couldn't help but applaud him for his decisiveness. However, they weren't deterred. The abyss was a place where only the strong survived. There were several abyssal creatures whose specialty was to dig underground in order to hide and hunt their prey. These monsters had joined their abyssal lords to conquer Elysium, and they numbered over 100. Dig and unearth these entrances, Elijah ordered. We'll show them that their move did nothing but delay the inevitable. The abyssal monsters who specialized in digging immediately went to work. Since they could sense the layout of the land underground, they were able to follow the destroyed tunnels that led to Agartha. A week later, a couple of the pathways that led to Agartha had opened up, and the abyssal army finally started their march to conquer the ancient kingdom of Elysium. Royal Palace of Agartha? They are coming, King Septimius sighed as he opened his eyes. Good, one of the 2 Supremes, who protected Agartha alongside the king, commented. Fortunately, we managed to delay their invasion by a week. Our defenses may not be perfect, but they will hold. Indeed, the other Supreme nodded his head. We will show these monsters that we are not pushovers. King Septimius smiled before rising up from his throne. A moment later, he reappeared several miles outside his city and looked at the hundreds of gaping holes that the burrowers of the abyssal army had dug. He could sense the powerful presence of the demigods who were leading their armies to conquer his lands. A faint sneer appeared on King Septimius' lips as he raised his scepter. The defenders, who had formed a defensive wall and were 2 miles away from where the abyssal army would appear, prepared themselves for the eventual battle that was about to commence. High above their heads, a gigantic flying bone ship hovered, similar to a flying fortress that was born for war. Ready! Echo shouted. Immediately, the skeleton swashbucklers went to their respective positions, preparing for battle. The ancient pirate king, Avery, stood beside Echo with his arms crossed over his chest. The flames burning in his eyes burned bright, ready for battle. Poseidon had also revealed the countless cannons in its body, ready to fire at Echo's command. The baby slime looked in the distance with a calm expression on her face. She didn't feel any fear. On the contrary, she was looking forward to the start of the battle, thrilled that she wouldn't be fighting alone. Standing at the deck of her ship, Lux looked in the distance with arms crossed over his chest. Asmodeus, King Leoric, Avernus, and Andros were by his side, ready to fight under his command. Now that Lux had become a saint, his named creatures had also grown a lot stronger. They were creatures that grew alongside him, which meant that the stronger he was, the stronger they would also be. Currently, Asmodeus and King Leoric were of the Calamity rank. Avernus and Andros, on the other hand, had stepped into the ranks of demigods. Along with Echo's forces, the number of demigods on their team alone numbered 4. But that was only including those who were present on the scene. Blackfire hovered behind Lux, and it was very excited to show its master the latest additions to its personal army. It had accompanied Hirswith in fighting against the demigods who had attacked Aspor Frieden. Because of this, it managed to devour 10 demigods, as well as hundreds of Calamity-ranked monsters. All in all, Blackfire could summon 12 demigods, excluding Hirswith, who was protecting the world tree of the High Elves. The 11th demigod was none other than Andros, who had transformed into a Strigoi. The other one was the demigod, Briars, who had arrived alone in the 6 kingdoms and found himself dying a pitiful death. Blackfire didn't bother to change the abyssal creature's form because the 4-meter-tall blue minotaur was already imposing enough. It deemed that simply reviving him as he is was good enough. "They're here," Lux said in a solemn tone. "Eiko, give them a warm welcome." Eiko nodded. "Go, Poseidon." The countless cannons of the giant bone ship started to glow. The moment the abyssal monsters spilled out from the holes to start their invasion, they found themselves staring at countless beams of light that vaporized anything they hit, not even leaving ashes behind. The Agarthians cheered after seeing Poseidon's might, raising their morale to its peak. Even King Septimius couldn't help but nod his head in satisfaction as the first wave of monsters that had come to conquer his lands were annihilated before they even knew what hit them. Eiko jumped on top of Avery's head to get a better view of the battlefield. Poseidon's bombardment had decimated the first few waves of monsters that had gotten within its strike range. Its main cannon was still inactive because it would only be used against demigods. Even so, its other cannons fired nonstop, sending the abyssal army's formation into disarray. A minute later, several purple barriers materialized on the battlefield, shielding the lower-ranked abyssal monsters from Poseidon's deadly barrage. More than 30 demigods, with Elager at the lead, finally decided to first secure their foothold before letting their subordinates massacre everyone in sight. The moment they made their appearance, Poseidon's main cannon started to gather energy, ready to unleash an attack that was strong enough to instantly kill a demigod if it hit them directly. Elager, who saw this, immediately summoned a multi-layered barrier, having felt that an attack with enough power to potentially threaten his life was about to descend upon them. The other demigods felt the same, so they, too, reinforced Elager's barrier with their own defensive abilities, strengthening it to its limit. A giant beam of light shot out of Poseidon's main cannons, forcing the Agarthians to cover their eyes due to how dazzling it was. A few seconds later, an earth-shaking explosion erupted in full, sending shock waves that also reached the location of the defenders, which were 2 miles away from the point of impact. "Brace!" King Septimius shouted as he created a barrier to prevent his people from being harmed by the aftermath of Poseidon's strongest attack. When the light receded, they saw the purple barrier slowly shatter into countless pieces. It survived Poseidon's blow, successfully protecting those behind it. However, due to the massive force from the blast, the shield still shattered in the end, making Elager shudder. A few seconds later, the rest of the demigods appeared behind him, completing the strongest lineup of the abyssal army that had decided to attack Agartha. "Don't give them a chance to unleash another attack like that," Elager shouted. "Charge!" The fallen angel flapped his wings and led the army to engage their enemies at close range. The other demigods followed and unleashed their long-range attacks toward the gigantic ship in front of them. Poseidon's body underwent a transformation as it shifted from its offensive mode to its all-rounder mode. This mode was meant for both offense and defense. Since their enemies had decided to fight them at close range, it couldn't fire its cannons indiscriminately since it would end up causing friendly fire. The long-ranged attacks of the demigods were blocked by a golden shield that protected Poseidon's body from getting hit directly. Lux, who was standing on the deck of Bone's ship, raised his hand and signaled for their counterattack. As soon as he gave the order, Avernus and Andrus jumped off of the Bone ship and took on their bestial forms. A vampire werewolf, whose only goal was to slaughter everything within its range, and a Dracolic, whose notoriety was well known across Elysium. Blackfire also summoned the 11 demigods under its command, and they didn't hesitate to clash against the abyssal creatures who were targeting Poseidon first. "It seems that Agartha is being underestimated," King Septimius said with a sneer. "They aren't even paying attention to us." "Well, I guess we'll just have to show them that it's a mistake," an age-old voice spoke behind King Septimius. He was none other than the founding king of Agartha, King Agarath. The first king of the ancient kingdom raised his sword, making the kings and queens behind him prepare for battle as well. "For Agartha!" King Aragath roared. "For Agartha!" Without another word, the founder of Agartha flew toward the sky and engaged one of the demigods who were attacking Poseidon's body. A supreme was weaker than a demigod, but what they lacked in power, they made up for in numbers. There were 20 supremes and hundreds of saints among the kings and queens of Agartha who had risen in order to fight. King Septimius and the two supremes by his side also joined the battle. Their target was none other than Elijah, who they deemed to be the leader of the abyssal army. "Foolish mortals, you are doomed to submit to the abyss," Elijah shouted as he parried King Septimius' sword strike before deflecting the attacks of the two other supremes, who were attacking him from different directions. "You are the fool here, fallen angel," King Septimius replied with a sneer. "You came to my kingdom to die, so I will gladly grant your wish." The battle became more intense the moment the bulk of the abyssal army finally joined the battle. The Agarthian army, which was headed by Shaun, Darius, Cleo, and Garin, clashed against the abyssal army without backing down. All of them were fighting for their homeland, their families, lovers, children, and their future. Even if they were to fall in battle, they would die to ensure that those whom they held sacred would live. "Avery, join the battle." Echo jumped off Avery's head and pointed at their enemies. "Yes, princess," Avery replied before jumping off the flying ship to repel the demigods who were trying to break past Poseidon's barrier. After her right-hand captain had left to join the fight, Echo jumped on her papa's head with a smirk. Lux smirked as well. He then ordered Asmodeus and King Leoric to show him the army that they had gathered throughout the 1 year he was away. The Wraith King and his Wraith Queen dove down toward the hordes of abyssal creatures that were targeting the main army of Agartha. A moment later, tens of thousands of specters gathered around them, creating a green tide that swept over the battlefield, hacking everything in their path. Since they were part of Lux's forces, all of them were imbued with his death god's aura and divine abyssal touch, making their attack stronger, dealing not only physical damage to their targets but also spiritual damage. Asmodeus, who didn't want to lose out to King Leoric, raised his hand. Hundreds of thousands of liches, skeleton archwizards, skeleton warlocks, and skeleton sorcerers appeared on, above it, and along the sides of the Poseidon's deck. Asmodeus had scoured countless graveyards, battlefields, and ancient sites, looking for the most powerful magic users. He intended to create an arcane, unholy army who would dominate the battlefield using destructive spells that would obliterate their foes. Some of these magicians were raised by Asmodeus, while others were subjugated by him. These undead mages who had managed to gain sentience had all agreed to become his subordinates after the Lich King used both fair and foul means to gain their allegiance. Even Lux didn't expect that his two named creatures had formed an army of their own that numbered over 100,000 strong. Asmodeus raised his hand, and all the mages channeled their powers to create a burning sun high in the sky. The Lich King sneered because although the battlefield was chaotic, with their enemies and foes fighting at close range, he was confident that he would be able to unleash an attack without triggering friendly fire. "Behold, the bringer of light," Asmodeus roared. "Mahimium Solais." The burning sun in the sky exploded into countless flaming spears that rained down upon the battlefield. To everyone's surprise, the flaming spears were only hitting the abyssal monsters, whose cries of pain, surprise, and frustration resounded on the battlefield, making the sadistic Lich King laugh out loud and causing Echo and Lux to smile evilly. A rain of death and destruction descended upon the abyssal army as Asmodeus expertly controlled the countless fire spears that only targeted their enemies. Since Poseidon's cannons were too powerful, it couldn't be used to attack because it would hit their allies without a doubt. Because of this, it simply used its defensive abilities to protect itself, preventing any attacks from landing on its body. Poseidon could have unleashed a powerful barrage and probably decimate more than half of the Abyssal Legion. However, since its allied were also fighting alongside it, it simply fired its cannons at places where none of its allies would get hit by its attack. Although many abyssal monsters died, many more took their place. Their army numbered in the millions, so they still put a lot of pressure on the Agarthian army, who was fighting to protect their homeland. Elijah and the abyssal lords under his command proved to be quite powerful as well. They instinctively knew that Avernus and the Strigoi, Andrus, were powerful, so they fought them in a 3-versus-1 battle. The demigods under Blackfire's command also fought against the other demigods. These demigods were fighting thousands of meters up in the sky, making sure that their battle wouldn't affect the armies that were fighting on the ground. Of course, The demigods could play dirty and target the Agarthian army, but they didn't do that. They believed that they were strong enough to overcome the defenders, and they also didn't want to lose a lot of their lower-ranking subordinates who did all the menial work for them. Even with the awakened kings and queens of Agartha, the battle proved to be more difficult than they initially expected. A few of the demigods who weren't fighting anyone decided to slip away from the battlefield and directly target the capital city of Agartha. These demigods specialized in stealth, so they were typically able to move without anyone noticing them. However, there was someone who did, and he moved to take action to hold them back. Lux expected that there would be some demigods who would decide to rush ahead instead of sticking with the main army. But he didn't expect that there would be 8 of them. Currently, all the fighting force of Agartha was trying to hold back the bulk of the Abyssal army, leaving the defenses of the capital to one of the ancient kings, who was also a supreme, as well as dozens of saints, who would serve as his backup. Lux calculated that the defenders would be able to hold back at least 2 demigods, but 8 would simply be too much for them. Because of this, he decided to take down the biggest and fastest threat among the demigods, which was a giant demonic falcon, whose speed was nearly as fast as lightning. The half-elf turned into a lightning bolt and crashed against the demigod in the sky. He might be a mere saint, but he was 3 times stronger than a regular saint because he was a progenitor, the first necromancer of heaven. Eiko, who was perched on top of his head, summoned a miniature version of her golden anchor. Using the power of its law to harden the moisture in the atmosphere, it made the water droplets in the air become as hard as steel pellets. If the falcon wasn't a demigod, it would have already been shredded to pieces due to how fast it was moving across the sky that was filled with these steel-like water droplets. Fortunately, it did have some effect, slowing the falcon, whose gaze had locked on to the half-elf and baby slime who were getting in its way. Although the half-elf was worried about the other demigods headed for the capital, he knew that he had to stop the giant demonic falcon first and worry about the rest later. Eiko. Pa. Eiko jumped off her papa's head and transformed into her fairy princess form. She then held the golden anchor on her hand like a weapon, creating several water tornadoes to hinder their opponent from going forward. Deus Gigantia. Lux raised his hand, and the giant skeleton king appeared behind him. Wind Tempest, the demigod roared, activating its full power and creating a hurricane that threatened to destroy everything around it. Eiko hid behind the body of the skeleton king to prevent herself from being blown away. Lux, on the other hand, melded with the blue crystal on its chest, taking full control of the giant skeleton king's body. Calypso. Lux called out the spear of Longinus and pulled his arms back. Dual Epic. The demigod, who had hidden itself inside the giant hurricane, found its body frozen in place as the effect of Calypso's dual ability took effect. The half-elf had the ability to sense the presence of any living and undead beings in his surroundings, so it was very easy for him to lock onto the giant falcon's body despite the fact that the hurricane was blocking his vision. Pierce through the void. Lux roared as he prepared to throw the divine spear in his hands. Spear of Longinus. The giant golden spear hummed as it was thrown by her master toward the center of the hurricane, where the demigod was frozen in place. The divine spear then transformed into a golden light, piercing through the hurricane and hitting its target in the chest, making the falcon screech in pain, dispelling the hurricane it had created. Eiko, who had been waiting for an opportunity, shot out like a lightning bolt towards the skewered demigod and raised her golden anchor above her head. Aiea! Eiko shouted as she swung down her weapon, which increased its size to nearly 30 meters, smashing on the head of the demigod and sending it crashing towards the ground. At the moment of impact, a powerful explosion took place, resulting in a dust cloud. All the bones on the poor demigod's body had been shattered by the golden anchor. Eiko was able to increase its size and weight at will, making it as light as a feather and as heavy as a mountain, however she wanted. Calypso transformed into her living armor form and dealt the killing blow to the demigod who had reverted to its demi-human form as it breathed its last. However, before the demigod could die completely, Blackfire appeared and devoured it. It preferred half-dead creatures to devour because they retained their ranks after it absorbed them. Although it also didn't mind devouring a dead demigod, The resources needed to revive it without degrading its rank was costly. After getting his target, Blackfire disappeared and returned to the other battlefield, where blood was flowing like rivers. It was eyeing both the demigods and the supremes of Agartha, whom it planned to devour at the moment of their death. Even the awakened kings and queens were also part of the group that it wanted to devour. Some of them might be old and nearly decrepit, but it was only a small matter to return them to their peak after it had remodeled their bodies. Lux didn't have the luxury to think about these random things as he and Aiko sped towards the capital city of Agartha, where the sounds of explosions were already taking place. "It's going to be all right," Aurora said as she lightly patted Princess Shayna's head, whose body was trembling in her embrace. "We're safe here." The sounds of explosions boomed above their heads, accompanied by the shaking of the ground, making those who had evacuated to the underground shelters of the capital city feel very anxious. "Sister, I'm scared," Princess Shayna replied. "Will we really be fine here in the underground shelter?" "Don't worry," Aurora assured her. "Father and Lux are fighting outside. They will not let anything harm us." The sounds of explosions became louder, and the shaking also intensified, making the children, who were in their parents' embrace, start to cry. Since children were easily affected by the emotions of other children, a domino effect took place, making all the children who were 6 years old and below start to cry. Their parents did their best to make them feel safe, but their voices failed to hide the fear and anxiety that they, too, were currently experiencing. Aurora raised her head to look at the shaking ceiling, and inside her heart, she called out the name of the half-elf, whom she knew was fighting with everything he had to protect her and her beloved family from the forces of the abyss. On the surface of the capital city of Agartha, "Do not let any of their attacks land on the city," the ancient king, who was known by his people as Farhan, shouted. "Block them with everything you have. We must protect our people at all costs." The saints behind him shouted in acknowledgement as they desperately worked together to counter the attacks that were being aimed at their city. Farhan and an elite group of saints had engaged a demigod, who looked like an earth dragon, that was planning to dig a hole and attack the city underground. This was something that they couldn't allow, so they fought tooth and nail against it, forcing the earth dragon to abandon its plan. The demigod then decided to fight the pesky supreme and his cohort of saints who were trying to get in its way. Although they were able to contain the dangerous monster, there were still 6 other demigods who were currently bombarding their city with powerful attacks and doing their best to destroy the barrier that protected it. Duel! A thunderous roar reverberated in the surroundings, forcing a demigod, who looked like a cockatrice, to look in Lux's direction. Some of the defenders, including a handful of saints, had turned to stone after meeting its gaze. Lux knew that all the demigods were powerful and dangerous, but he needed to fight the stronger ones first before he dealt with the rest. Aiko, who was in her fairy princess form, had called Blackfire, asking it to summon the 3 Supremes from the Ford Federation. She was currently a calamity-ranked monster, but she was still not strong enough to fight against multiple demigods, even with the power of the Golden Anchor in her possession. Blackfire obeyed and summoned the 3 Supremes, who all worked together to target one of the demigods attacking the city. Aiko then summoned her clones, who summoned calamity-ranked slimes alongside her. The slimes they summoned were thunder and lightning slimes, and they immediately worked together to unleash a barrage of lightning bolts and thunder waves to repel the demigods who were attacking the city. The battle became very fierce, making the ground shake under their feet as explosions reverberated in the surroundings. Lux, who once again summoned Deus Gigantia, was duking it out with the cockatrice, who had the ability to summon stone spikes and pillars that were dozens of meters long. Although the half-elf was immune to petrification, the cockatrice was fast and able to use multicast, allowing it to unleash several spells at the same time. But these spells weren't aimed at Lux. They were aimed at the city. The cockatrice was very sly and knew that the half-elf would protect the city no matter what. Because of this, the giant skeleton king used its colossal body to shield the city from these spells. The other demigods also realized that this was the most effective method to deal with those who were trying to attack them. Since Aiko and Lux were able to dodge their attacks, they would simply force them into a situation where they couldn't dodge. The simplest way to do that was by attacking the city with powerful spells and attacks, without the need to hold back. As expected, their strategy worked. The bones of giant skeleton shattered and fell on the ground as it desperately tried to hold back the attacks of 6 demigods at the same time. Pa! Eiko shouted as she used her golden anchor as a shield to block the attacks of the demigods, alongside her papa. I know, Eiko, Lux replied through telepathy. I will leave the Skeleton King to defend, while both of us attack 1 demigod each. Okay. Eiko nodded. Immediately, Lux turned into a lightning bolt, leaving the blue crystal on the Skeleton King's chest. He was confident that the Skeleton King would be able to hold on for a few minutes, and he would use that time to decrease the number of opponents on the battlefield. Just as he was about to do this, a powerful pressure suddenly descended upon his body, forcing him to stop his charge midway. Oh, so you're that person who got in Daniel's way? A voice that was filled with amusement reached Lux's ears, making the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. His gaze scanned his surroundings before landing on a particular spot that didn't look out of place. However, since he could sense the aura of the living and the dead, the creature that seemed to be invisible wasn't able to escape his gaze. As expected, you can find me. The voice filled with amusement chuckled, and then it appeared. An alien-like creature, standing on 4 legs, with a giant tentacle that served as its head, looked at the half-elf with a sinister glint on its diabolical face. Its fiendish clawed hands made cracking sounds as it opened and closed them. Countless rows of razor-sharp teeth appeared in its tentacle-like face, making it look like a creature that came straight out of a person's worst nightmare. I was getting bored conquering the western regions of Elysium, so I sent one of my clones to observe the conquest of Agartha. The terrifying creature said with the same amused tone it had used earlier. Since I am only sharing my senses with this clone, I have no plans to participate in this battle regardless of its result. However, after seeing you, I changed my mind. The creature then unleashed a wave of malicious energy from its body, making the defenders inside the city scream as they desperately held their heads in an attempt to stop the stabbing pain that they were feeling inside their heads. My name is Nyarlathotep. Nyarlathotep introduced itself using one of its clawed hands to point towards its face. Although this is just a clone, it still possesses some of my powers. So, what is your name, boy? Lux didn't answer and simply raised his hand to summon the Spear of Longinus to aid him in battle. You don't want to give me your name? Fine. Nyarlathotep chuckled. It doesn't really matter since you will be dying soon anyway. Although the creature in front of him was only a clone, Lux instinctively felt that its strength was at the peak of the demigod rank. He already knew that the battle to defend Agartha wasn't going to be easy. But, with Nyarlathotep's arrival, things just turned for the worst.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.